Chapter 28. Billy felt guilty about snooping in her mother's office. She'd never done anything so underhand before, but then she'd never been in this amount of turmoil either. For pity's sake, how many people were told they were adopted only to have that story quashed, most unconvincingly, and left dangling with no conclusive answer? She was sure Freya and Seb had been hedging. Not lying, perhaps, but she'd seen a cagey look flash between them that suggested they weren't telling her the whole truth, which left her in an impossible situation, as if she'd fallen into some kind of vortex that kept spinning and sucking her down, with no hope of a way out. Billy's anxiety certainly wasn't eased when she remembered the long history of tension between her mother and Freya. She'd been conscious of it even during her childhood, and she was sure there was still a missing piece to this puzzle. But she needed hard evidence. A piece of paper, a birth certificate, or some other legal document that would tell her the absolute truth. Thus, the snooping. Her mother kept a personal folder in her filing cabinet, separate from all the business papers. The folder held wills and power of attorney and other important papers. Billy had seen the tag, neatly printed in Pearl's careful script. But there was no sign of it now. Her parents had probably taken the folder with them, or stowed it at the bank for safekeeping. Damn it. Disheartened, Billy wandered back to the living room with Wonton following at her heels. The view, for once, wasn't bright and sunny blue, but quite overcast. Clouds scudded across the sky, chased by a wind that whipped the sea into choppy grey peaks. When had that begun? Rain was quite possibly on the way, and Billy wondered where Freya had got to and when she planned to be home. "We've been abandoned, Wonton," she said, stooping to give the little dog a comforting scratch between her ears. Normally, Billy didn't mind her own company, but today she was restless and would have liked someone to talk to. Okay, she would have liked to probe her aunt till she wormed the truth out of her. Was Freya in hiding? Billy took a photograph album from a shelf in the TV cabinet. Her baby album, with a padded pink satin cover and lace-trimmed hearts. Incredibly kitsch and sentimental. She hadn't looked at it in recent times, but she knew the photos pretty much by heart. Now she would look again, just in case they held a vital clue. Since she was an only child, there was a ridiculous number of photos of her as a baby, starting when she was really quite tiny, lying on a quilted rug, or in a bassinet or pram, in her mother's arms. Later, she was propped on her Granny Ruby's knee. One photo Billy was especially fond of showed her laughing in her father's arms, with a youthful Troy looking down at her with a soppy, doting grin. The album was incredibly sweet and terribly normal. No photos at the hospital where she'd been born, mind you, but that didn't really prove anything. And there were no photos with Freya, which was kind of strange, now that Billy thought about it. After all, Billy had been the first in her family's new generation. Surely an aunt deserved a Guernsey in at least one of the family snaps. Unless Freya had already left the island by then. Billy was a bit hazy about the exact date of her aunt's departure. She gave up when she got to photos of her chubbier self crawling and then learning to walk. With a hefty sigh, she closed the album, which had been no help at all. Or perhaps she was just a hopeless detective. Hang on a sec. Speaking of detectives... Billy jumped to her feet, momentarily elated. Dan Dexter might be the perfect person to turn to with a problem like this. Not only was he easygoing and considerate, but given his line of work, he was bound to have all kinds of useful knowledge. Bonus, he'd given her the number he reserved for personal calls. Then, just as quickly, she flopped on the sofa again, deflated. Dan Dexter might have been perfect, if they were still on speaking terms. She hadn't heard from him since she'd told him about her baby, which was perfectly understandable, especially as she'd hinted that the baby's father was still in the picture. What am I going to do, Wonton? The dog's ears pricked when she heard her name. Her little tail wagged. Do you think I should ring Dan anyhow? Because he's very approachable and I'm kinda desperate? Wonton made a gentle little yip, which might have been a message about her hunger, but Billy took it as encouragement. Okay, she said. I'll ring him. And she did so before she lost her nerve.
Hello?
Said a small, childish voice. Oh, said Billy, surprised. Is that Molly?
Yes, who's speaking, please?
The kid was very well trained. Another tick for single dad Detective Dan. It's Billy, Molly. Billy from the island.
Ooh!
The little girl squeaked.
Hi, Billy.
Then loudly,
Hey, Daddy, it's Billy from the island on the phone.
in the background, Dan's voice sounded.
Tell her I'll be there in a minute. Daddy will be here in a minute.
Molly reported dutifully.
He's cooking our dinner. We're having sausages.
Oh, sorry. Billy had been so caught up in her own problems, she hadn't even bothered to check the time. Now her mind flashed to an image of Dan in the kitchen. He probably had to cook most nights, poor guy. Tell him I'll call back later.
Billy will call back later, Dad. Here, I'll take it.
Dan's voice sounded close now.
Can you set the table, Moles?
A beat later.
Hi, Billy.
Hi. This time she was surprised by how good it was to hear his voice. Deep, warm, calm. Look, sorry, Dan. I didn't mean to interrupt your dinner. I'll call back later.
No, you're fine. Dinner can hold. How can I help you?
Now that it came to the crunch, Billy faltered. This is going to sound pretty weird, but it's sort of a police matter.
Weird is part of my job description.
Billy could feel all manner of clenched muscles relaxing as she settled back on the sofa. Okay, here goes. No beating about the bush. Deep breath. I was wondering if you could find out whether I've been adopted. Is there a registry or something? Or if you can't help me, is there a website? Several seconds passed before Dan responded, and Billy couldn't blame the poor man for needing time. Her request was totally out of left field.
So you think you might be adopted?
He said.
But you don't know for sure.
Yeah, I told you it was whacked.
I take it you can't just ask your parents?
Well, I can, I guess. But I haven't, as yet.
Are they still touring around the country?
Yeah. And I hate the thought of upsetting them. This brought another pause from Dan.
Are you sure it would upset them unduly, Billy?
No, she wasn't sure. Although she couldn't imagine her mum taking this calmly. It's mainly that there are rumours here on the island, she said. And they're doing my head in.
You do sound pretty stressed.
Did she? Just as well Dan hadn't heard her earlier in the day. Sorry, she said. I've let myself get pretty stirred up over this. I shouldn't have bothered you.
Don't hang up.
No, I haven't.
Look,
He said.
this isn't really my field. I'm not a private investigator. But there is definitely a process for people who actually know they're adopted to find their birth parents. They're entitled to the information once they turn 18. It's a bit of a balancing act between privacy laws for the mother and an individual's right to know, but the procedure's all in place.
I see.
But I'm not sure how that would work if you don't actually know whether you're adopted. That's tricky.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I could put you in touch with a private investigator.
Dan offered next.
They often work with adoption issues.
Okay, thanks. I'll think about it. Billy was beginning to wish that she hadn't bothered him. It was time to stand on her own 2 feet, do her own research, face her own demons.
Where are you?
Dan asked.
In Townsville?
No, still on the island. She couldn't help wondering what he might have suggested if she'd been closer.
How are you?
He asked next.
What does your partner have to say about this?
Her partner? Gulp. Of course, Dan had no idea. But at least she was used to telling this story now. There is no partner, she told him. And again there was silence. We've broken up, Billy added.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Dan's tone was careful now. Carefully neutral.
But he knows about your baby?
Oh, yes, he knows. He's just not interested. Billy was tempted to tell Dan the whole story, but she stopped herself just in time. She'd already landed enough of her crap on his shoulders.
That's tough,
he said. Yeah, but that's how it is. God, he must think she was a total screw-up. Sitting straighter, Billy injected brightness into her voice. I'm okay though, Dan. I'm getting used to the idea of being a single parent. I might even call on you for a few tips.
Sure. I'd be happy to help, if I can.
Thanks. You're a champion. Good grief. Now she sounded like a cheerful sports coach. So lame. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen.
No problem,
he said.
I hope you get everything sorted.
Thanks.
And for what it's worth, Billy, I reckon you should speak to your parents. You've got enough on your plate without having that kind of tension hanging over you.
Thanks, she said again. I'm sure that's good advice. And say goodbye to Molly for me, won't you? She wasn't sure she should have added that. Was it going too far?
I will,
Dan said.
Take care.
After they'd disconnected, Billy sat in a kind of daze, thinking about Dan and how he cared for Molly and was getting on with his life after a truly heartbreaking tragedy. And here she was, dithering and foolishly bothering him about asking her parents one difficult question. What was she? Woman or wimp? I'm going to do it, Wonton. Beside her, the little dog sat up expectantly. Shit. Wonton was on her mum's white sofa and Freya had been so anxious about keeping her off. Picking the small dog up, Billy cuddled her close. Wicked little thing, she murmured. But I'm going to do it. A phone call to her dad would be safest, and once that was behind her, she would know the worst. Or, thinking positively, she might be flooded with relief. Either way, she would take Wonton for a walk as soon as the call was over, if it wasn't raining. Or maybe they would go even if it was raining, and Billy would buy Thai takeaway. She felt distinctly better now that she had a plan.